It's been a while since Arachnid's been a major threat, he says completely sarcastically. But more importantly, it's been a while since we've addressed any of RC's baggage when it comes to her past partners, Cliffjumper and Tailgate. And seeing as how Prime is a show that likes to kick your nads right in the feels, it does make sense that they would get around to bringing that stuff back up again. The episode picks up with Starscream having returned to the Nemesis. He's giving this big speech to Soundwave, apologizing for all of his incredibly traitorous behavior. And a funny story, whenever I think back on this episode and actually remember that scene, because my memory is actually surprisingly crap, I always think that he's letting Soundwave record him so that he can disseminate it out to all of the other Decepticons and apologize to all of them, something that Megatron made him do as a condition of coming back. But no, he's just apologizing to Soundwave to cover his own ass, mind you, because Soundwave saw a whole bunch of his traitorous behavior firsthand. And he seems genuinely humbled. Like, I honestly believe that almost dying by Megatron's hand humbled him greatly. That was a pleasant sound that my voice just made. That said, when he then enters the control room and hears Megatron talking to Arachnid about someone who screwed something up at some indeterminate point in the past, he of course assumes that it must have been him. Come to find out, he logged the crash of an old Decepticon transport, but he did so very, very poorly. It seems as if he didn't investigate the crash fully, and it turns out that crash was supposed to be carrying a very powerful weapon, the Immobilizer, a staff which can, as the name suggests, immobilize people. This is a thing that Megatron would like to have, and since it seems that Starscream didn't do a good enough job searching the ship to find it, he sends Arachnid and Starscream out to fix Starscream's mistake, and he's absolutely furious about all of this, and it's a very well executed scene. As tends to be the case, the villain stuff in this episode really is the most interesting part of the episode, but that's really saying something here, because we get some really great RC stuff here too that's also incredibly interesting. They go to the ship, and of course they're Decepticons, and they're these two particular Decepticons, so they don't get along. They start posturing in front of each other, and Starscream even mentions to Arachnid as a way of bragging that he's the one who killed Cliffjumper, in part to remind us that he's the one who did that, and also in part to facilitate the misunderstanding that comes later on in the episode, and we'll get to that later on in the summation. But they eventually come to blows. Arachnid even binds him in her web when she discovers that there's another half of the ship, and that Starscream's the only person who knows where it is, and that he's not going to tell her where it is. Unable to do anything, he does end up telling her, but she leaves him there on the ship, alone, bound in webbing. Meanwhile, Arachnid made the mistake of reactivating the ship's power systems to read the manifest, something which Starscream warned her not to do, allowing the Autobots to track the ship's location. So they're here, including Optimus Prime, who was at the base this week, believe it or not. And if it had been everybody else but Optimus, Arachnid probably would have stayed and fought, but when she saw Optimus there, she hauled ass, as you do. And RC chases after her, trying to get her revenge for Arachnid killing Tailgate, but Optimus eventually catches up to her, and he gives his big heroic speech about how revenge is not the way. RC is not buying a second of it, but he gives it, and it's a good one. It's a good Optimus speech. I don't entirely agree with it, because it's not like this is a regular revenge case. Arachnid is also a very, very bad person, an irredeemably bad person who would kill you just as soon as look at you if the mood struck her. She's a danger and probably needs to be disposed of. But I still get the sentiment that he was trying to convey. And I will admit that if RC had just listened to him, things might have been different by the end of this episode. Different in a better sort of way for our heroes. They managed to capture Starscream in part thanks to Arachnid's efforts. And Starscream, who just feels like the universe is screwing him over at every opportunity, defects to the Autobots in a odd turn of events. And of course he's not serious about it, he's just trying to save himself. But at the very least, he is Megatron's second in command. He knows a lot. They could get a lot of information out of him. And Optimus is the kind of person who believes that everyone, no matter how bad, deserves a second chance. And he does kind of have a point. He flat out says that he believes that the only way that they're ever going to be able to build a lasting peace with whatever remains of the Decepticon forces after the war is if they give their enemies a chance. I think he's being foolish, but I still get where he's coming from. And that's really the real strength of this episode. It asks these questions and it doesn't give you a concrete answer to them. By the end, you don't really know which one's better, because both have their clear merits, and where other shows might have just told you whatever answer they wanted you to come to, this one leaves it open-ended and lets you think on it yourself. Is it better to give your enemy a chance to redeem himself, or should you just get rid of him when you have the chance, if you have the chance? In a war where thousands of people have died and may die again in the future. So of course Starscream tells him about the other half of the ship, the one that has the immobilizer in it, and Optimus leaves, of all people, of course, RC to guard him, and goes with B and Bulkhead to confront Arachnid directly. She attacks using the immobilizer against them, and that, combined with her agility, is incredibly effective. She is beating all of them, including Optimus Prime. And as all of that is happening, RC is talking to Starscream, and because of a misunderstanding, he admits that he's the one who killed Cliffjumper to RC, who is perfectly happy killing him for that. And honestly, as much as I like this version of Starscream as a character, I think she probably should have. Again, this is a war, and people are dying. Some of them because of Starscream's direct actions. But she's a good person, and Optimus's words are still resonating with her, so she gives him a fighting chance, undoing the stasis cuffs that they have holding him, and he gets in a sneak attack, wounding her very severely. And even after Bumblebee manages to outsmart Arachnid and defeat her and even destroy the immobilizer, and then returns to where RC is waiting, he still escapes. But now, Arachnid would know that he was working with the Autobots, even in a very limited way, even if just to save himself, so he feels like he doesn't have a faction that he's aligned to anymore. He's gonna go rogue, gonna go strike out on his own. And back at the base, after Ratchet manages to de-immobilize everybody else and is working on fixing RC of her severe damage, Optimus talks to her, and we get a fantastic dialogue between the two of them where, rather than chew her out or get angry with her the way that Megatron would with one of his subordinates, he makes it clear that he understands. He understands where she's coming from, and that all he wants from her is to take this as a learning experience. And honestly, I think she should too, but if I haven't made myself clear, what I feel like she should probably learn here is that she should have just shot Starscream in the head when she had the chance. Yes, if she hadn't let him out of those cuffs, they might have brought him back to the base, and he might have told them all the secrets of the Decepticons, and they might have had the war won peacefully in a week. But it's also possible that they would have brought him back to the base to interrogate him. He would have found some way to get free and killed them all when their guard was down. We don't know. It's possible that this is worse for them because of what she did, and it's possible that it's better. And I just feel like it would have been the safer bet to cut their losses and do away with him when they had the opportunity. Like, looking at this from a logical standpoint, I feel like that would have been the better option. But the fact that I can look at the plot of this episode and say, I think the heroes are wrong, and yet still look at them as heroes and admire them for the things that they stand for, that's what makes this show so good, and makes this episode in particular so fantastic. It's one of the best character studies of RC in particular, but also Starscream and Optimus in the entire first season. Not counting some episodes which come a little bit later, which really dig deep into Optimus's character, but we'll get to those when we get to those. End of the day, I really love this episode, and it was a treat getting to rewatch it for this review series, but that's really been the case for all of these, even the ones I don't particularly like. And Starscream's untethered from the Decepticon label tend to be the most